Arabic is not the language in the thumbnail. As a matter of fact, English is not at all related to Arabic, and they likely did not stem from a single language. And the other language in the thumbnail isn't even Russian. English and Russian are related, but that isn't the point. But wait, why is that the case? Why is Arabic not related to English, but Russian is? What does relation even mean here? If everybody on Earth uses language to communicate, then how come some languages aren't related? Wasn't there a single language that all languages came from? Why does the one language in the thumbnail use writing that looks like Arabic and Russian? Why is it that Persian, the subject of this video, is definitely related to English? Well, let's get ready for a fine mix of modern facts, well-educated theories, and personal yet semi-professional conjecture. Let's discuss the facts of why Persian is related to English, and Arabic isn't. To clear some things up, we have to talk about language change. Why they do change is a big topic, and I actually have a sister video planned out for this one that will come out on or before December 20th. But the important bit is that lots of languages stem from singular sources. This singular source is called a proto-language. And that should mean we just have a pyramid of languages, stemming from the first languages to the ones we have today. The problem is, we didn't have one single original language. Yeah, I'm shocked too. To clarify, this means that people just started talking at different points in time to communicate, at least from what we can tell as modern linguists. But let's clarify why relation is important. Relation is important because related languages work in similar ways to each other, but different languages work differently. Not all languages just develop things the way we do, because language is arbitrary, which is a term we will discuss later. But for a simple example, Arabic, unrelated to Persian or English, uses the system of roots for words. The root of KTB relates to writing, so words formed with this root will relate to writing in some way, such as the word for book, writing, and office. But English and Persian do not do that in any way, so knowing why languages relate or do not relate is pretty important for knowing how they work. With that in mind, we do have many reasons to believe both Persian and English came from the same proto-language, that being Pi or Proto-Indo-European. So let's take a quick look at what this means for relation. Pi is essentially the father language of most of the languages in Europe, and many of the languages stemming from there to India, encompassing the UK and Iran, which speak English and Persian respectively. Pi is strange for the fact that its descendant languages spread over thousands of miles, and also the fact that we have zero written records of its existence. All because it existed before writing was mainstream. The reason it is seen so far over the world is because of the horse in 5,000 years. The language originally started somewhere around the Black Sea in about 3500 BC, and it quickly spread over the European continent and the Indian subcontinent, so that explains the gap between the two nations that speak English and Persian. But why are the languages different? Again, a separate video will come out on this, but it's because of many things. New words had to be invented. Sounds just flip sometimes. Language is constantly about making things simple, and then complex for no good reason. And too many other reasons to quickly talk about. And finally, what about the two separate writing systems? Well, to be succinct, imperialism! Both the Russians and Muslims had something to do with the writing systems. The Muslims heavily influenced modern-day Iran, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan, which, yes, all speak Persian, through many obvious things like religion and culture. But these Persian-speaking places also ended up using the writing system for a variety of reasons. Probably the whole fact that they were run by the Muslims, so they kinda had to use the stuff that they were given, but maybe they just thought it was cool. And the reason Persian is also written in Cyrillic, only in Tajikistan, is because, oh, you guessed it, imperialism! The Russians just kinda said, we have modified the Cyrillic alphabet, please use it. Oh wait, did we say please? We meant use it, or we will probably commit some crime against you. Sorry. More crimes. Now that's a simple history of the language, but let's take a look at the important stuff. Persian and English are very different. You'd expect a related language to look super similar, like Walter White and Heisenberg, but they can be as different as Walter White and Bryan Cranston. Why do they actually look nothing like each other? But then why do we know they're related? Well, there are some key factors in knowing why languages are related, but let's learn what relation even means. Relation in linguistics relates to whether or not two languages stem from the same original language. Both Persian and English stemmed from Pi, but they also stemmed from separate proto-languages birthed by Pi. So let's keep that in mind. That's why a language like Russian seems so different from English, despite descending from Pi as well. But what about Arabic then? When the Muslims ruled over the modern-day Persian-speaking countries, they gave the language a lot of vocab. Roughly 20% of all vocab in modern Persian conversation is of Arabic origin, with 50% of everything in a Persian dictionary being of Arabic origin. So why is Arabic unrelated? Well, it's because Arabic probably didn't descend from Pi. It descended from an unrelated language known as Proto-Afro-Asiatic. Both of these languages probably aren't related. Because these two languages have no actual ancestral history, as in stemming from the same language, the languages are considered unrelated. Not to say that it doesn't share words, culture, and a writing system with the Arabic speakers. Relation isn't just an arbitrary thing either. The way a language works is heavily determined by its proto-language, and not a language that influences it in terms of just vocabulary. So, how can we prove that both English and Persian came from Pi? Many factors show off why languages can be related, and for the sake of simplicity, I will stick to three main categories. These categories can be applied to many languages, but considering how languages are related, some of these are more specific to Persian and English themselves. With that in mind, there is a pretty simple way to begin this: core words. When it comes to any proto-language, there are a bunch of words that the descendant languages will still have. While a language like German is clearly different than English, we still have many words from Pi, which both languages evolved from. This is the same for Persian. But if Persian and Arabic aren't related, although they have many shared terms, then why is English related to Persian? Well, for one, this is for integral terms, words that describe basic and common ideas. According to Alex Skendler, related languages usually share terms such as words related to family members, numbers, and pronouns. I would also personally toss in common events and animals, but I'm a freshman linguistics student, so take it with a grain of salt. To clarify why these core terms are important, we must know that unrelated languages don't share many words at all, because words are arbitrary, as in their sound is not related to the meaning of a word in any intrinsic way. For example, daughter is the English word for daughter, but the Japanese word is musume, and it is completely unrelated to English or Pi. However, the word for daughter in Persian is dokhtar. This is similar to daughter in every way except for that kh. However, we had a similar sound at one point in time as indicated by our orthography. If you're confused on why we don't say that anymore, check out this video and comment your favorite subscribe and the bell down below. Either way, the reason this means a language is related is because languages seldom change around basic words. This is why a language like Japanese has many Chinese loanwords, but mainly in terms of foreign concepts. The word for warm is still of Japanese origin, and that's the same for English and Persian, but in terms of originating from Pi. The respective words are warm and garm. Even then, Persian has more similar words, and hearing them might help you get what I'm talking about. The word for 6 is shish. The word for who is ki, comparable to the French ki, which is also a Pi language. The word for dark and thunder are tariq and tondar, and the word for eyebrow is abru, which is technically not completely related to the English eyebrow, because while both eye and brow come from Pi, the Persian word just stems from brow, so the addition of the A sound is just random. This scientific field is going to fucking kill me. Even words for animals are similar. Worm, kerm, wolf, gurg, mouse, moosh. There are many other words I could rattle off, but I'll just toss a small list up here to avoid saying more of the same. We know this language is related for the fact that these basic words aren't different, as an unrelated language would have no problem using words that sound nothing like that. A language generally borrows words when it needs them, so if it already has words from the language it descended from, then it will not need to replace them. The word for 6 in Japanese is roku, which is clearly not similar to 6 and shish. But even then, these similar words aren't enough. Weirdly enough, some languages can borrow a shocking amount of words from another language and still not be related. As mentioned before, most Japanese words are of Sino-Tibetan origin, as in Chinese. Yet the language is not Sino-Tibetan, it's Japonic. So why is that? Well, it's because of grammar, or at least grammar with DLC, syntax. English can't spoke you this like can if you tell. That hurt to say, and it was probably a headache to understand too. That's because this sentence completely broke English syntax. If I want to make a phrase like that, I have to form it correctly. And this version of the sentence almost works perfectly, but the verb speak is conjugated in the past tense. So if we change it to the present tense, we get the syntactically correct sentence. You can't speak English like this, if you can't tell. That is syntax explained quickly. It's essentially the ordering and modification of words in a sentence for correct communication. And this matters because all languages have unique syntax. For example, a language like Chinese doesn't distinguish between speak, speaks, spoke, and will speak. It just has shuohua, which fulfills the role of each word based on context. But we can tell Persian is related to English for many reasons. But let's stay simple by talking about two topics quickly. Most Pi languages are in either SVO or SOV order. Basically, the sentence I eat bread should directly translate as I eat bread or I bread eat. And Persian does this. I gotta stop doing that. Persian's order being slightly different seems weird at first, considering that words usually shouldn't just flip places. But when it comes to Pi, this makes sense. Pi was a language that had cases, which are essentially ways of inflecting or slightly modifying a noun, which identifies the role that a word plays in a sentence. In English, we actually still have some inflections when it comes to pronouns. He is a subject pronoun, for example, and him is an object pronoun. Pi had so many different ways of inflecting words that word orders could go in many different orders, most popularly SVO and SOV. Persian having a different order to English is a good thing, because many Pi languages show this off. Pi languages such as Proto-Indo-Iranian, which is the father language of Persian, more closely related to Persian than Pi, and you can even see this in Spanish. Because whenever the word it comes up in a sentence, the word order becomes SOV. Persian also has similar ways to modify words like in English. When we negate verbs in English, we can use not, as in I am not going to the store. The simple yet notable na sound is what we need to look at here, because most Persian words are negated like this. The way to say I didn't do that would translate to something like this. Specifically, I that not did. And that way of negation is the same as English, it comes from Pi. Like in English, removing that one word makes the affirmative form of the sentence. Another one of note is hem. Not as in the meat, but as in homo, same. The word hamotok means roommate, translating to same room. There are other examples, but I think you get the point. Both languages have syntactic similarities. But we have one final category. While basic vocab and syntax are sufficient ways to talk about why two languages are related, despite what you might think, language change is actually a great way to see why languages are related. To start, let's talk about similar sounds. Professor Jackson Crawford has stated that words in related languages can have similar consonant clusters to each other. To properly explain what that means, let's look at Persian. As mentioned before, the word for daughter in Persian is dokhtar, and that cluster of hukt is super interesting because English once had a strikingly similar sound. Daughter was pronounced something like dokhtar, using a cluster that is notably similar to that one. Even in the word stand, the Persian equivalent is istadan, showing off the st cluster seen in English. These consonant clusters are also important because unrelated languages may dislike clustering sounds together. This is why Persian and English can even cluster consonants. Because some languages, like Arabic, absolutely hate doing this, because it doesn't fit with the way that they produce sounds. So the fact that we even had the hukt cluster at one point in time shows this relation. But clusters aren't enough to prove this relation, so let's put the nail in the proverbial coffin with Grimm's Law. Now this one is important. When languages change, they tend to change in similar ways. While languages liking to keep their clusters in one way or the other is notable, what if I told you that Pi had its own set of rules for sound changes, to the point where many of its descendants changed in the exact same ways? In no way is this better demonstrated than by Grimm's Law. Essentially, we can say that sounds change uniformly across languages, just at different times. The Persian word pedar is of note. As a matter of fact, you probably see the English word already, father. According to Grimm's Law, Pi languages tend to change their P's into F's. The reason for this change is kind of funny, because it's not some weird thing to have to do with how our mind perceives sound or some psychological crazy stuff, it's just that the letter P sucks to pronounce. What? Yes, that's it. We say sounds and they aren't fun, so we make them easier. Which makes you say, then why did Pi have this in the first place? Why did they do it? Well, this is because of how languages change. The topic of language change is humongous, to the point where this video that was going to cover both language relation and language change has essentially halved in size just looking at the script. Languages tend to change from simple to complex and to go back and forth. But that is why I just love language so much. Ever since I started studying Spanish back in 2018, I've had the same mantra in my mind going on. This is stupid, and I love it. As I mentioned, the field of historical linguistics is pretty big, so I had to end up cutting a lot from this video. In a bit more than 2 weeks, I will have a video detailing why languages change coming out. And I will also get a video on the Scottish Resistance out before this year ends. Just to clarify for my massive influx of subscribers over a single video on the funny jetpack, in no way is the Scottish Resistance overpowered. The thermal thruster? Yeah, but this? Ugh. This is more like explaining why I think Fly is the best Breaking Bad episode. It's not as good as Ozymandias by any means, but I just like Walter White going fucking insane over a stupid goddamn fly.